very good evening to all of you who have joined in before time. And we will wait for a couple of minutes more, maybe another 2 minutes for the other participants and learners who have registered to join in, because we would not want to keep us waiting from the learning that we look forward from today's conversations with none other than Ms. Sarbari Basu, who's connecting over an early morning virtual connect with us. And it's a Saturday morning for her, as it's a Saturday evening for us. And so you understand the uniqueness of this is that we are connecting not only across nation, we are connecting globally, 2 time zones holding 1 learning space with NHRD Kolkata. So another minute for all of us to join in for this 1 hour. And while we're waiting for some more of our learners to log in, I'm sure most of you have been following the news of the feather in the hat for Kolkata, for India, which is the INS Vikrant. The Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Friday said INS Vikrant is an example of Indian government's thrust to making its defense sector self-reliant and has made the country part of a select group of nations who can indigenously make aircraft carriers. PM Modi also unveiled the Indian Navy's new ensign, which drops St. George's Cross and incorporates the royal seal of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. So it's a big achievement for India in going live with a ship which is going to clearly indicate the self-reliance of the nation amongst the world leaders in such endeavors. So amidst this, we are again connecting globally and understanding how we can take a learning from what is happening as best practices in a sector where one of our member is working and has a lot to tell us about how she has contributed to different sectors and brought in the best she can. And as her LinkedIn says that, people look forward to situations and they want to look forward to Sarbari coming in and giving those solutions and making the solutions contribute effectively in the execution and implementation from end to end. It's 6:02 and I will not hold this back for any longer. And while we wait for some more learners to join in, I will quickly do the introduction for her. However, the onus is on me to invite her to introduce herself as the best person to take us through what's in her that we don't know and she would want us to know. So Sarbari is a global talent management and operations execution leading strategic transformation executionist with an enriching work experience of more than 2 decades. She's presently associated with ExxonMobil based at Houston, Texas, United States. She has worked with several organizations like British Oxygen, ICI Limited, Reliance, Jumbo Electronics, Cummins, Columbus, Indianapolis, and Hannibal. So without further delay, I request Ms. Sarbari Basu, with our humble gratitude for her, to join our conversation for this 1 hour in HR Speak episode number 4 of season 5. I welcome her humbly.
Thank you, Sweata, and thank you everyone for inviting me to be part of this session. As Sweata mentioned, it is a Saturday morning here in Houston. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I'm originally from Kolkata. I'm still a Bengali. Lived, educated in Kolkata. I went to Presidency College and then Institute of Social Welfare and Business Management, where I did my MBA. started working in Kolkata for several years, even though I had national roles with both British Oxygen and ICI. And then with Reliance, Reliance at that point of time was setting up Forecourt Petroleum Retail. And so I headed up Eastern Region. Even though I had national roles, continued to be based in Kolkata. So that's still home. In 2004, I moved to Dubai, literally, with a job that I thought at that point of time was interesting. It was the first time I was working globally and actually working across borders. And the big learning for me was laws, regulations, socioeconomic climates. Dubai is a primarily export-oriented workplace, which means if you have to hire, you have to hire people from other countries. Because sorry, there must have been somebody coming off mute. And so it was very interesting for me to learn, how I need to take into account immigration laws. How you need to learn labor laws of other countries if you're making offers in those countries, or you're hiring there, or you're terminating people, for example. If you're terminating somebody in Singapore, that's a very different set of laws and regulations that we need to take into account. So big learning for me. I joined Cummins, the engine manufacturing company, which I know has a large presence in India. I actually joined the Middle East operations, Middle East and North Africa, based in Dubai. To me, that was the first time I worked for an American multinational. I'd worked for British companies, and in a role that reported into the global headquarters. It was culturally working with the Americans as part of an organization that is American-owned is very different, because there's a lot of emphasis on governance. There's a lot of American legislation and laws such as Sarbanes-Oxley controls frameworks that you don't really get exposed to unless you're in a role like that. So for me, it was a big learning. The other big learning for me was in roles like those, you're expected to be the decision maker in a number of things. Now, at the time when I had worked in India, I always expected to have a recommendation, and I expected my boss to tell me what to do. I mean, that's typically the way, at least we worked in those days. And suddenly out of the blue, I was being told, no, it's your call, you decide. So the discomfort of taking accountability for one's decisions was super interesting. I mean, in 2011, Cummins sent me on assignment to the US I originally went for 3 years and then landed up staying for, as long as I've lived here, which is over 15 years. Worked in Cummins with different roles right up to 2021. In 2021, September, I left Cummins. I was actually supporting the C-suite, so the CHRO, the CFO of the corporation. I left to join Honeywell, where I headed up HR for a global business selling meters, which we had a very small operation in India. I had spent about 9 months in Honeywell when ExxonMobil made me an offer to come up and head up global talent strategy. And it was interesting for me to come back to oil and gas as an industry when the world was going through a large energy transition. And probably that was the reason why I kind of said, fossil fuels are going out. I've worked in an engine company, sustainability, carbon capture, greenhouse gases limitation. All of these are very, very big trends that the world is going to, live through and work through. And so working in the talent strategy space with a very diverse portfolio of businesses from oil and gas to chemicals. ExxonMobil is the world's largest chemical manufacturer. And so if you think about chemicals like plastics or wax, we might still say we're going to limit our fuel usage, but plastics is the basis of modern life. And the interesting dichotomy is the very the renewables that we're talking about that will replace fossil fuels, whether it's your electric vehicles or your wind turbines, all of these consume plastics. And plastics comes from the feedstock of oil and gas. So it's a fascinating industry to be with. I've spent about 4 months just getting to learn the business, finding my stride. I'm based in Houston. I've lived in the US now for several years, and I'm very, very happy to share this time with you and share my experiences. Please feel free to ask questions. This is, at the end of the day, I want to make sure you take away something that is of value to you.
That's right. That at the end of the day, what matters is how does this entire conversation bring value to the listeners who have joined in. And more so today's topic being talent strategy. One of the key competencies that I heard in the introduction that you spoke about is accountability, and we'll see how accountability plays out in the role that HR holds in talent strategy. So even before we go into how the same is a best practice for you and what are the critical factors that are considered by you when you consider talent strategy in your role, what is important is for the group to first come on a common platform and understand what is talent strategy. And then from there, we can move into and zero in into how are the ways we can work on it. And if that's okay with you, ma'am.
Sure. So it's a big name and it's an aspirational name. We always say strategy, talent strategy. But what it is essentially is a set of choices. It's a set of choices on how you decide to deploy talent management. So talent management, as you know, is starts with the entire employee life cycle, starts with attracting employees, recruiting them. When they come into the organization, it is setting their goals, developing them, finding out what their development needs are, doing, development need identification, doing performance assessments, setting performance goals, evaluating them, using the outcomes of the performance management system to either do development planning or next steps or career planning, or even doing compensation. So, you have your performance ratings. A lot of organizations take the performance ratings and they apply those to determine what your annual salary increase is likely to be, what kind of bonuses will be paid. So it also drives compensation. So throughout the employee's life cycle, how do we pay them? Do we pay them fixed? Do we pay them variable? Do we pay commission? What kind of periodicity does this get paid in? Then there are, as part of the talent management system, the big thing that I think is in the last few years has become super important, engagement and retention.
Correct.
How do you engage employees? How do you measure engagement? What kind of surveys and surveillance do we do across the organization? What are the drivers of engagement? How do we ensure that we are providing the employees with the right, right levers so they feel they can bring in what is called, it's a very important term these days, discretionary effort. So you pay me to do 8 hours of work, fine, I go home. How do you get the discretionary effort from me? So retention and engagement and retention. So again, in the space of retention, what is driving retention? Why do people stay? Whether do you do stay interviews? Do you do exit interviews? At the moment, at least in the US, they're talking a lot about what is called the great resignation. People are leaving jobs. So what is driving that great resignation? Are there socioeconomic factors? Are there gender factors? Are there, and again, US, this is a big deal. At the moment, are there racial biases that are driving attrition? Finally, in the overall talent management space is also leadership development. What are our expectations of the leaders? What leadership behaviors are we setting? How are we growing leaders? What is leadership learning? early career leaders, mid-career leaders, senior leader development, etc. So all of these components come together to make up talent management. In the talent management space, we can make a lot of decisions. So for example, I might decide that I need to hire more people from colleges because those are the skills that I'm looking for. And I need to bring them in, and I need to devise a rotational training program so those people can be groomed in the role. And that's how I grow my talent. Another organization might say, no, I don't think I have the time or the ability. I don't want to make the investment. I want to hire people that are experienced from the market. So the way you do a campus hiring and the way you do experienced hiring is different. That is a choice that we make. And the choice that we make is determined based on a few things. It's based on what is my business model? How do I make money? How much money do I want to spend? How much infrastructure do I want to build? When you start looking at these choices through the lens of the business, and you bring those choices together to form a talent management system, that is a talent strategy. So it is a set of choices.
Great. And so when we are working aligned with business and understanding that how much of their kitty is contributing to the strategy of recruitment and contributing to the life cycle of an employee, and basis that maneuvering the talent strategies that we have in our platter, what would be the design of any talent strategy? Maybe an overarching learning design or a talent strategy design.
So let me give you a real example, because that's when it starts making sense. So let's talk about, you all have cars, right? You take your cars to your workshop to get serviced, right? What happens when you go to the workshop? You have somebody that calls you, tells you this is how long we're going to need. This is when you drop your car off. This is how much it's going to cost you, whether it's a lubricant change or a fuel change, or your window washer needs changing, etc. So right. The business of Cummins that I work for is the distribution business. Think about the same thing, but for big trucks. So you have a fleet owner who brings their trucks in, either there's a breakdown or there is a planned maintenance that needs to be done. So you are now going to call the service center, and you're going to have a very skilled mechanic who's actually going to do the job. Now, typically, these skilled mechanics are very difficult to find, particularly in the developed countries of the world. So if you think about Europe, the United States, Australia, people don't want to be these people, in these jobs, because they consider them like, they're called grease monkeys. They're jobs that people don't feel like are sufficiently respectable. And if you think about India, China, why would I want to be a mechanic when I can be an engineer? I can be an engineer and I can learn coding and I can go abroad. Why would I do that? So bottom line, this is a very difficult to get talent market. It's very difficult to source. Over and over, if you look at the Gartner reports, you'll find that over the last 10 years, skilled labor is the single biggest segment of the market that has been de-growing. Vocational schools don't have had declining enrollments, etc. So several years ago, as we were looking to expand the service business of Cummins Distribution, we kind of started thinking about, okay, so we're going to hire all these people. How are we going to hire them? Where are we going to get them from? So the process we went through was, let's first understand the volume. And again, you can do this on a global stage. You can do this on a local stage. You can just say that this is my business. This is typically I would say you would need to do it at a job level. Like, this is the job that I think will help my business expand and grow its revenue. For us, it was how often and how quickly can we service trucks? Because every time we turn a truck around, we can send the bill and people will pay. We collect the money. straight revenue in the bank. We're not spending anything beyond salary. So it's a very direct revenue stream. So when we started looking at this workforce segment, and we said, okay, this is a critical workforce segment, but in most countries in the world, this is deployed. What are we going to do? So you go through a process of identifying brainstorming. You look at benchmarking. So we benchmark other companies in the local market. So for us, it was John Deere. For you, if you are, say, in banking, you might want to pick up 2 or 3 local banks. If you're in manufacturing, identify the 2 or 3 benchmarks that are, competitive for you, and identify what is it that they do. You can do some desktop research to find out, and then devise your program. We came up with an apprentice program. We said we have to go in at a high school level, appropriate level in the different markets. We have to go in and do a selection there. We don't want to wait for vocational schools, for people to graduate out of vocational schools. We want to be able to put them in, go to high schoolers and say, I'm going to employ you now. For the next 4 years, we will pay for you to go to vocational school. We will pay you, say, first year we'll pay you 25%, second year we'll pay you 50%, third year we pay you 75%. And then, assuming you pass your vocational school exams, you would have worked after school with us as well. We will give you a job. And that is how we bring you in. But we also will ask you to sign a bond for 2 years. That locks our investment in. So we started looking at, and I always say, when you start having a new strategic project, do a pilot. Cost it, identify it, do it in a smaller location. You might say, I'm going to hire 3 people. I'm going to hire 3 of these. I'm going to see what happens. I'm going to learn from my experience. We did a pilot in Australia, and we ran that through for a couple of years before we decided to expand to the US. So by that time, we had learned, what works, what doesn't work, how much, what hidden costs are there. Because at the end of the day, for you to get an approval to run any sort of pilot, you have to cost it. So I don't know if that's helpful, but that's typically how I would go about creating a talent strategy initiative, which is focused around bringing in fresh high school students into the organization and training them through an apprentice program.
Yes, and that is definitely more from a lateral thinking approach for us, because most of us here feel that, or maybe the way hiring is happening across sectors and industries in India is more in the, you can say, the business as usual way. People come in, put in their application forms, they come in, give their interviews, they come with a 1 year, 2 year experience or 10 years experience, basis the banding and the designations that are there, which will bring them one step up, is how they are hired. However, sometimes one of the factors which can contribute largely to retention of employees is the right onboarding experience, which means it starts from the recruitment and staffing of the process. So obviously this is a small brain teaser that you've induced among the learners today, that how do we also relook at the recruitment strategy and then create a plan so that they have a higher stickiness with the organization, especially at numbers which are higher, which is the bottom of the pyramid, the frontline sales. And that's where the maximum attrition happens in most of the sectors and industries. And that's where we start thinking of what are the other ways of gaining him rightfully within the system, giving him those engagement parameters, bringing him with a larger stay span with the organization. And we completely miss the first point, which is how are we recruiting these people so that the stay is longer, as you rightly said, the apprenticeship model. So quickly moving into the focus areas of talent strategy. What are the pillars of talent strategy, ma'am?
I think the first pillar is data and insights. And frankly, this is an area that, and I own myself in that group. We in HR, we're not very good at data.
True.
We tend to struggle with it. And so I find that, I mean, I've had data analytics leadership roles in a number of, in both in Cummins, and I kind of own that, that piece partially in ExxonMobil. Now it's not even data, now it's called digital. It's digital. So we've got to be able to look at multi-data, big data. Again, big data is a thing of the past. We used to talk about big data maybe 5-6 years ago. Now we're talking about AI. We're talking about artificial intelligence. We're talking about machine learning. We're talking about robotic process automation. I think the core of it is we have in HR have to define what measures success for us, and be willing to look at data and metrics consistently and use those metrics to do a couple of things, do diagnosis. So you talked about attrition and retention. I will ask each one of you to think about, do you have a dashboard of data that you share, that you look at every month, if month is the right period of time? What does that dashboard have? Does it have hires? Does it have people leaving? Does it track month over month? Does it give you trend information? If you're looking at hires, do you know how long it takes for you to hire someone? What does that measure? Does it measure the day you posted the job to the day the person joined? Has that changed? If it's taking you, I'm picking up a number, 50 days to hire someone from posting to joining, has that improved over time? Is that the right number? Is that the right number that your business needs? Where are you getting your people from? Are they coming from LinkedIn adverts? Are they coming through agencies? If so, how much are you paying agencies? Is that cost going up? Is that cost affordable? These are all data points. They're all data that you can typically get out of any HR system. Even if you don't have an HRMS, this is data you can track, because hiring data, leaving data, data for where those people are getting hired from, it's being tracked somewhere in the system. So the important thing with, I think the biggest pivot that HR needs to look at is data. I'll tell you, in the US, over the last couple of years, more so, data has become way more important, particularly during COVID, because what we're talking about, the Great Resignation, for example, just think about the fact that, during COVID, a few industries got hit really badly. One of them was the airline industry. Now, the airline industry, if any of you, I don't know what their situation in India is, but globally, the airports are a mess. You can't get into, your bags don't come. They actually had to shut down Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam for a whole half day because they had no staff to run it. So what do you think that is? I think that's a demand forecasting. I think what happened was, and this is kind of my hypothesis behind it, there's a certain number of employees or workers that an airport needs to function. During COVID, airports stopped functioning. So instead of following on that number and keeping close to data and metrics, they decided to let a whole bunch of people go. And the others resigned. So now when the airline industry, the travel industry has come back with a bang, they're suddenly seeing a huge gap between the numbers needed to run an operation effectively. That's just an idea about something where HR data, where people data can have such a large, huge impact on the business, on the customers. We are all living it every day, right? Just to give you a perspective of what the data landscape is looking like, every piece of the HR process can now be automated. So the overall global spend on data tech or HR data tech is in 2021 was 24 billion. In 2028, that is expected to be 36 billion. So there is a lot of companies that are available, applications or apps that are available that can help us get really smart on HR data. We talked about engagement, right? So the best known vendor in the engagement survey world is a company called Qualtrics. What is Qualtrics? Essentially what it does is, a couple of times in a year, you configure your questions, and Qualtrics is the survey platform to which you are sending out surveys. Now, that is a very sophisticated platform, because what Qualtrics will also do is, once the survey results are collected, employees go in, they log in, and they respond to the survey data is collected. Qualtrics would generate the reports. So I, as the HR person, can go in and I can, through a dashboard, generate a slide deck that has really nice graphs and data visualization, has word cloud, sentiment analysis, all kinds of things. It's all baked into the platform. Qualtrics will also send managers who are required to put in actions out of the engagement survey. So say, for example, my engagement, my group, my employees, the people that report to me have said timing of meetings is an issue, or collaboration is an issue, or caring is an issue. I can go in and put in my actions, and then Qualtrics will sum it up for the HR leader to look at, or the leader to look at. What it will also do is that it will send reminders. So I get reminders in my email box from Qualtrics, or sometimes a chatbot will pop up and actually ask me to say, you haven't gone in and put in your actions. So the bottom line is, there is a lot of data technology that exists. Now, all of these platforms mean there's a lot of reporting. There's a lot of information available. I think the first thing we need to do is familiarize ourselves with the basic metrics and be able to look at that metrics to understand the trend. So again, attrition is a big one these days. Try to understand your attrition numbers. To Shweta, your point, what is the tenure of people that are leaving us? What is the age of people that are leaving us? Is there a gender preference? So I think one of the key pillars is definitely data, being able to understand the data, being able to critically think about data, and be able to identify and diagnose what problem it is that we're trying to solve through our talent strategy. Is it hiring? Is it retention? Is it leadership development? Is it succession planning? What is it? The second pillar I would say is awareness of business. So each of us, we're a support function in HR, right? At the end of the day, we exist to make the business successful. But how well do we know our business? I feel like in my career, I've done various roles that are supporting business leaders and leading business HR. Those are the ones which I enjoy the most, because now I can ask all sorts of questions, right? How does this business make money? What is the manufacturing process, or the trading process, or the service process? How does it happen? What are the failure modes? Who are its main customers? What does the customer want? Go out, or if you're in a manufacturing environment, I would strongly suggest go out to your warehouses, your factories, spend time on the floor, understand what the manufacturing process is, what is working, what is not, learn from the supervisors. If you have a commercial or a sales organization, go out in the field with your salespeople. Ask them to take you to customers and see how the business happens. Spend time with your finance people. Understand the financial statements. At least get a sense of what are the triggers that will help this business become more profitable. Because at the end of the day, that is how we exist. That is the reason why we all exist, right? To make a business more profitable and more successful. That's right. The third, I will say, pillar is we are not very good in HR. We're very good at theorizing, and I'm making a generalized statement to be a little provocative, but we're not very good at implementation. And implementation is not just going and executing something. It is having a plan. It is identifying your stakeholders, of who need to be updated. First of all, who need to approve the plan? What are the milestones? At what periodicity are we going to come back and share a status? And then finally, having a disciplined, consistent approach at driving that implementation plan, providing ready updates to your stakeholders, taking their views, doing course corrections if we have to, reporting on the financials of the plan, making sure if we said the plan would cost, I don't know, $50,000, then we are going back and providing an update to say either we're within budget or we're not. And then finally, when you do complete the implementation, thinking about change management. Typically, most HR programs require two things. And as HR folks, we tend to forget them. One is change management, because anything that we are doing is a process change, will require people to behave differently. So if you don't think about the change management ahead, when you're actually developing the plan, it comes across as an afterthought and really doesn't stay. The other piece is communications. If it's going to be a change, say, for example, an organization is automating its payroll process. So I'm an employee. I'm used to getting my pay slips sent to my email by the person who I know sits in that office, and I have his phone number. So if there's something wrong with my pay slip, I can call. Now, if you do automation, it's no longer the person who sits in that office. It is being done through either a third-party vendor in another city where they are mass processing pay slips, or worse still, it's going to be done through process automation. So it's going to be done through a series of process data interfaces, and the pay slips get generated out of the system. If you have a question, you could go to a chatbot and type in your question, or you have a centralized HR ticket tool like ServiceNow, which is very, very popular right now globally. And you would have to type it in, and somebody would get in touch with you and raise a ticket, and they would send you the response via email. Now, that is a big behavior change from picking up the phone and calling person X and asking, hey, why is my payroll, why do I have an extra deduction this month? Or I don't see something, I may have taken a loan, it's not showing up, whatever your question might be. So communication and management of change, letting people know, thinking about communication, not as email communication only, but, do we need change champions? Do we need little, maybe over lunch, we do a Zoom session and have people talk about what is changing, what is the experience, maybe set up a person that they can come and talk to if they have questions. So there are ways to do the communication and change management, but it is very, very critical to driving an effective implementation. And then finally, ensuring your implementation sticks. Measuring it, again, going back to the same, the point I made earlier about metrics, ensuring that you have the metrics set up to say, I'm implementing a onboarding program. I want to make sure my program is well staffed, it's happening according to plan, the cost is not being overrun, and I want to ensure that the employees, the new hires that I'm putting through the onboarding program are actually satisfied. So, I mean, I put in a satisfaction survey. I could start looking at the performance or the tenure of the people that went through the program and continue to track it. So those are the three, I would say, data and using data and metrics effectively, getting closer to your business and learning the business's strategy, its key competitors, getting to know the business, and then finally driving an effective implementation program.
Great. So this brings me to a very personal question, which means that I would want to also know how you have worked with accountability and the competency of change management in the past, maybe a small story or a best practice that you would want to share with us. And while you're thinking of a situation or a scenario where you have played out these two competencies, I would request our learners and the members who have logged in for any comment or any question that you have, please put it in the chat box so that we can take it up in the remaining 20 minutes of the 1 hour if HR speak. I would request the NHRD Kolkata chapter coordinator to please open up the chat box so that our guests can put in their comments. Also, if there is something specific you really appreciated in this discussion that happened so far, please put that so that we get an indication of what is it that is inspiring you in the conversations that we are having. And at the same time, put in the questions that are specific to your need in your space of work. The chat box is open now. Thank you so much, everyone. So we also have a question, but before that, ma'am, if you would want to share a best practice to sum it all up.
I'll share one with you, and this is to do with org design. So a few years ago, I was still working for Cummins, and we had done a major acquisition and integration in North America. We had taken 16 independent distributors, and Cummins had bought them over. They were now 100% company owned, which basically meant we had to implement all of the Cummins processes, the grade levels, the compensation systems, the benefits programs of 16 different businesses into ours. Some of them were very good. People liked them. Most people didn't like them because now we suddenly said, you are no longer, Cummins Northeast, an independently owned distributor where you could make all your decisions. Now you are part of this $25 billion company and you have governance, and a whole bunch of people from corporate office are going to sit on your heads and tell you what to do. So they didn't like it. Now, over time, we went from 16 distributors to one company. And that was a big, big change. So suddenly their existence was being wiped out. So we actually used what I thought, we worked very closely with McKinsey for that project. And we used a really interesting methodology that I want to share with you. It's called creating change champions and change stories. And it's high engagement. It's very personal. Now I will put a caveat on this. In most American corporations, there is a large emphasis on you as a person. Now, I haven't worked in India for a really long time, so I will let you judge whether the same is true in India or not. So, for example, if this had been an American audience, I would have had a picture of my family, a little blurb about what do I do in my spare time, and some stories about what my daughter is doing, and a little bit of a history of myself, because they're fascinated by people that work in senior levels that are from different countries, simply because we are articulate, and so. It's a very personal culture where people want to know the person who you are. I mean, not just your work person. So there's a lot of disclosure involved. So the methodology we used was every one of us in the leadership team had to think about our own change story. And it had to be personal. It couldn't be work related. So a colleague of mine, she has a child who has Down syndrome. She talked about when she first came to know about Elizabeth's, that she had this disability when she was a very young mother. So she talked about, how that was difficult for her, how the idea is to walk the audience through the change arc. So it's like, when you go with change, if you look at the Baldrige model of change, you go from disbelief, you're then negotiating. It's literally like the 7 stages of grief. And then you go to acceptance, and then you go to embrace change. So it's a curve. It's like this.
That's true.
It starts high, goes down, goes really down, and then rises up. So each one of the leadership team members created their own change story. There were no slides. It was very much a person-to-person conversation. We then went around to every site. So that was a lot of sites. And we got people together in one place, and we talked about these change stories. And then we invited people to respond. And after that, we started talking about what the organizational change was. So the tactic here is that the process is, first, try to build a connection with the individual. Try to take that change, the painful change you are asking people to make, and break it down and personalize it. And then what happens is there's an emotional connect, right? So people start to identify with your story and they start to think, oh, this happened to me, or I've gone through it. And then that thing that you got an email about, which is like going to change my work life forever, doesn't seem that intimidating anymore. Now, this is not a one and done type of thing. It takes a while before change can stick. But I just thought it would be a good story to share with all of you about a very creative, innovative way in which to handle change.
Great. Well, ma'am, to answer the first part of what you were saying is about how India operates. India works on personal connect. I mean, whether it's business, whether it's people at work, whether it's collaboration among peers and team members, what plays out the best is personal connect. And that's where the outcomes happen. So one of the strategies that are being taken up across industries and sectors are connect to people in businesses over personal space. And that would mean those informal connects, informal meeting, chat ups, lunches, also to contribute to the attrition question mark that we are trying to address at different sectors. But then that's bringing us back to the question here, that is, how did you yourself improvise in the role of change from regional to global role? And then what is the competency-wise difference between an Indian CHRO and CHRO in Europe and USA?
I think a couple of things. So I'll answer the second question first, and then we can go to the first. So the first I will say is, the first difference I would say is the variety of regions and cultures you're dealing with. So think about this way. So I'm implementing a benefits program, right? If I implement it in India, I have one set of laws that I follow, and one set of market practices. I'm implementing a benefits program, and now I have to implement that globally. So in the US, I have different benefits. Europe is a mess because Europe is, depending on which countries in Europe I operate in, I have difference in legislation. I also have things like data privacy laws, which in Europe are very, very strict. I have work councils in Germany and Netherlands where they're very strong. In Germany, you can't do a thing without a works council. So I have to know that. So I think the CHRO in a global, or an HR person in a global space, I think has to keep in mind, when I'm thinking about any type of strategy, I have to keep in mind that my audience is global. I have to know what the risks are, and I have to adapt. The other piece, and I find this very interesting because I'm Indian, I'm Asian, I'm Bengali, right? And so that's where I grew up, that's where I started working. And I have to constantly, and I've spent 15 years working in a global environment, and I now live and work in the US. In a leadership team, the ExxonMobil HR leadership team has no Indians. There are a lot of Indians in the industry, in the technical side, the HR leadership team. I have a colleague who is, she's American, but she has Bangladeshi roots, but that's about it. Everybody else is either European or American. And so it's kind of trying to figure out how to operate in that environment. So I'll give you an example. The whole personal connect thing, as somebody that grew up in India and worked in India in the early to mid 90s, I'm not very comfortable talking about my personal life. It's just not natural to me. But in a Western environment, I have to. People want to know, people want to know about my daughter, they want to know about my husband, they want to know about my mother, my brother, the list goes on. So I have over time learned to develop a persona that I share with them. I wouldn't say it's necessarily duplicitous, but it helps me that I do it in another language. Correct. So you have to develop a persona that works with your global colleagues. However, I also have responsibility for India or even China, sometimes Singapore, And I will say that I can drop that then, because in that environment, I can be myself. So I think the adaptability is important. Cultural sensitivity is important. Knowing your audience, if you're going to network with an American, you don't need to know about American football, but you have to be aware that they're going to talk about it. So it's all of that I think helps. The other piece that I think, particularly at an HR leadership level, is important is, as a leader, you may have to address issues across cultures. And again, that sensitivity, that getting to know, being able to handle that level of variation is critical. You can't micromanage Westerners. You just can't. They won't prefer it, they won't like it, they will leave. And they will make your life very difficult as a leader. So being able to kind of lean into that very influence-driven style is super important. So I hope that was helpful.
Yes, that was definitely helpful.
And I think I kind of answered the question around how I've adapted myself. I feel like I can do it because I've just done it for a long time now, and it's become second nature. But it does mean that I have to be willing to show some vulnerability, which again, in the environment that I was brought up and started working, it was not very, very comfortable. Mm-hmm. The other thing I will share with you is, and this is true for most Western environments, we as professionals, and when I say we, I count myself, we are not very confident of our decisions. I think I mentioned to you the whole decision-making dilemma that I had. The first time in my life, I had to separate someone. I was fairly early in my career, and I needed to approve the separation, and I had a moment of like deer in the headlights. I don't know. I went to my boss, who was in the US, and I have a lot of respect for the gentleman. He shepherded me through my first few years in working in an American multinational. And he kind of said, it's your call. And I was like, no, I recommend it, but what do you think I should do? And he kept pushing back and saying, it's your call. And so at one point of time, I kind of sat down and said, okay, I'm going to make this decision. The first time it was always hard. I think so, but there is a lot more. I find when I work with younger people that come out of Western environments, they are a lot more confident compared to
That's right.
So my piece of advice to you is take a decision. There's a 50% chance it might go wrong, but just take it.
Thank you so much for that, Sarbari. And ma'am, so we've got a comment by Chinmay, who says he's directly pinged me, and what he writes is, ideally and directly, business is always owning the talent, and HR only thus becomes the caretaker. And a question from Sabyasachi, therefore, is, ideally, who should own accountability of talents in any organization? Should it be
Leaders.
business or HR?
Leaders, not
Leaders.
HR. HR is, and I say this with a lot of, this is my firm belief, HR is a facilitator. We facilitate. We provide infrastructure, we coach, we advise. We don't own talent, and the talent is owned by the leadership. So talent processes, again, we provide the infrastructure, we train, we coach, we judge quality. If the processes are not happening right, we provide input, we provide improvements, but we don't own talent.
Thank you. And Sana wants to know from you, what traits do you look for when assembling a leadership team together?
Culture fit. I think so. It's interesting. I had to put together a leadership team from scratch in my last role at Honeywell. And, competence, technical knowledge, all of that you can build. A couple of things that are very difficult to build. One is the culture fit. A leadership team is a team that has to engage in conflict, collaborate, work decision-making together. And you just can't do it unless there is a culture fit. I use a few tools. I use, if you guys are familiar with MBTI, Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, It's a great way to look at profiles of different leaders within the team and kind of seeing what the preferences are and how those preferences come in the way. There's another great tool called TKI, Thomas Kilmann Instrument, which looks at ways in which you engage in conflict. What is my preferable, what is my most preferred conflict management mode? There is a process that you can look up. It's called Team Effectiveness, New Leader Assimilation. It is a great way to go in with, show your business partnering skills. Once you've assembled a leadership team, ask the leadership team without the presence of the leader what they're looking for. And then once you get all the inputs, share that back with the team and the leader. What it does is that it helps bring out and iron out some of the areas that potentially may create problems in the future. But to me, the biggest factor is culture and culture fit. The secondary factor might be industry awareness and industry leadership.
Okay, so Sana, you know what you have to look out for when you are supporting the larger decision of leadership team selection. And the last question for the evening is, starting your career in India is a success factor or not?
Depends. I mean, I don't think there's a geographical bind. I think when we work in India, we're very hard workers, and we're not used to we're not afraid of late hours. We're not afraid of, diligence. We're very diligent. We're very, we can slog. And I think that's a huge value add. The other thing I will say is most people that have worked in India, or, lived in India or studied in India, they're very competitive, and that helps. The Western environment is not as competitive as we think. Now, the competitiveness can be a positive thing or a negative thing. The positive side is that it spurs you on to do well and, succeed and work hard. The negative side is you can become distraction. You can, sometimes you're so competitive that nobody wants to work with you. You're difficult to work with. The advice I would give is, if somebody is working overseas or in a global role, don't, keep the good things of the India persona with you. Like I talk a lot about diligence. I talk a lot about education in India. I talk a lot about bringing in technical knowledge from India. The basic work ethic of most Indians is very, very strong. Our basic sense of responsibility, our accountability, our integrity, these factors are almost drilled into you. Don't take the bad things, which is, and I will say this, being an Indian and having lived and worked there, sometimes we're always looking for a shortcut. Like, let's find a way to circumvent the process. Let's try to see how we can adapt the process. Typically in Western environment, like I said, governance is a very big thing, and process governance equally bigger. So don't take the somewhat negative things of the Indian environment. Take the positive things, and I think there is enormous capability, enormous talent that exists. I am amazed. When I was in Cummins, I worked very closely because there was a couple of projects I ran out of the India organization in Pune, and I was amazed by the quality of work that happens.
Thank you so much for that. And one more question that I would want to ask you, and this is for all of our audience who wants to know you more, is what would you like to do when you're not working, and what or who inspires you?
Those are very deep questions. When I'm not working, meaning when I'm retired, I have no idea.
So at this point, just when you're not at your work.
I travel a lot, and I've been very lucky. I've been in global roles for over 15 years. So I've traveled for work to literally every continent. And my husband and I, we have a 26-year-old who, by the way, is living and working in Calcutta right now. Even though she grew up outside the country, she has got a lot more She still thinks she's an Indian and Calcutta at heart, so that's where she's living right now. So my husband and I are in the US by ourselves at the moment. So we travel a lot. So I would probably say travel more, cook, eat. I'm a Bengali at heart, so I love cooking. And so macher jhol, ilish mach, everything. And Houston is a great place to get really good mach. So
right.
we're certainly enjoying that. In terms of who inspires me, I honestly don't know at this point. I would probably like to say it is probably people outside of work that inspire me because, I mean, at the end of the day, this is a job. I like my job. I love my job. There are some people that I've worked with that are great HR leaders that I've felt that people I'm close to. There's a lady called Berta in Canada who runs her own consulting company. She's like 76 years old. She travels all around the world and talks at these HR conferences. I mean, her energy and her passion is amazing. So there are these people that I've met along the way. I've made a lot of friends in different countries. I literally can land up anywhere and, call up someone and we'll have a great time. So I feel like I've been very blessed. I did not choose this career. It happened literally out of Jammu Electronics giving me a job, very coincidentally in Calcutta, and just packed 2 bags and left, actually without my family. And 3 months later, told my husband, no, this is a nice place, you should come over. Since then, we've lived abroad. But thank you so much for letting me be a part of your evening. And I wish all the rest of you all the very, very best. You are connected to me on LinkedIn. I'm hoping to be in Kolkata for Durga Puja after 15 years. So very, very excited. Hope nothing goes wrong with that. But thank you so much for your questions and your comments.
Thank you so much. We are humbled with your presence, ma'am. And it's a new custom, or it's a new way of ending the 1 hour of talk show that we've adapted recently. And that is, I request all the participants, learners, members to switch on their camera and we all click a selfie together. So Sweata, would you also please, as the backbone of NHRD Kolkata chapter, switch on your camera? Members, leaders, Avijit Da, we have all of you here. I request all of you to switch on your camera and let us take a group picture together, as this is our first overseas global connect. And this is just the beginning to more such events to come live to you. I hope all of us have got a good insight into what is talent strategies, what are the pillars of talent strategies, how we can take the best practices of what has happened in organizations where ma'am has contributed to, and how we can implement those little things to start with and take it to the ocean of larger transformations that can occur therefore. So all of us, another 30 seconds to switch on our camera. Sabisach, it's okay, you're driving. We'll miss you in this photograph, but we'll definitely have you in for the next one. Sweata, would you be clicking? Okay, so sure, 3, 2, 1, and this is our memory. Someone did this, great. Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, ma'am. This was amazing. Lot of energy, lot of love to all of you. We look forward to the Durga Puja, and we'll have ma'am in the city as well. So we might want to connect informally as well. Yes, fingers crossed. Have a great day to you and a great evening to people in India. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.